Welcome back to part two of We Speak Up Teens versus Parent Takeover. I got to talk to Bennie Currie about the one of the people who are out there in collaboration, actually the founder of collaboration who was out there with the Parent Takeover, supporting the Parent Takeover. Let's have a watch of that Zoom interview with him. So tell me more about what collaboration does.
Well, I call it a community engagement de-escalation um, um, effort to address what they call it purge activity when the kids first started doing this in 2016, to the extent that it led to property damage and things like that. Today, people would probably call it a teen trend or a teen takeover, but it's kind of similar. Kids come in by the dozens on Halloween night, looking for stuff to do, and in some cases, that that looking for something to do turned into activity that they shouldn't be doing, like tossing M80s in the cars and things of that nature, which is is what happened in 2018. And then in response to a considerable amount of teens getting arrested and other kinds of vandalism that occurred, I was at a meeting with aldermen and other members of the community, and they were looking to do some programming, for Halloween for the next year, things that they thought could be entertaining and possibly distracting as well, to prevent the kind of activity we had the year before. But nothing I heard really was focused on the teens or their teen behavior, and in a way that could prevent what had happened in the past. So I suggested that we do sort of what I used to do to de-escalate matters when kids from the high school around the corner from me would be in the alley making a lot of noise before going to school. I, rather than calling 911, would just leash up my elastic Malamute, take them for a walk through the alley, and then boom, the kids would be gone. I thought, man, maybe on Halloween night, people could come out in large numbers and populate their streets and 53rd Street, the business corridor of Hyde Park, by walking their dogs or just taking a walk, being out, so to speak, and being positive at the same time, not confrontational or anything like that. And the alderman Sophia King at the time said, "That's a great idea, Benny. You should go ahead and get that started." And I had no idea exactly how to do that, but there was a gentleman from Ridgewood Court, a block that had about 24 cars damaged by kids hopping on them and what have you, in 2018. And he said, "Hey, I'll help you." And so I said, "Okay, great." And we decided to work together on that. And I used the term block captains, or either block activation leaders. He was the first one, and then I went to a few block parties in the neighborhood, started recruiting people, and the next thing you know, I had about 25 or so folks designated to be the leaders of their block, and that their job would be to knock on doors, introduce themselves to their neighbors, something people don't do as much anymore, and encourage them to give their treats out from the front porch, encourage them to be outside, and to engage with the kids positively. It's like, we see you, you see us, let's all try to have a happy Halloween sort of thing. And with the objective, again, of no one being arrested and people having a safe, happy Halloween. And the first year we did it, it snowed, so we didn't have to worry about it so much. And then, the pandemic impacted a couple of the years, but we still had the whole process going, and we've been doing it ever since. In 2020, I ran into Thaddeus Tukes and his Chicago Freedom Ensemble of professional musicians, who felt that they should be on 53rd Street that Halloween to be a de-escalation factor, something they had been doing at Black Lives Matter protest earlier that year. And when I saw what he was doing, I said, hey, that's a good idea. I like what you're doing. Let's partner. And so since 2021, that's what we've been doing. We have the block captains or block activation leaders activating their blocks throughout the neighborhood. About 40 to 45 people are now involved with that. And then we also get people to volunteer to wear orange shirts and grab a pumpkin and give out treats on 53rd Street, while Thaddeus Tooks and his band goes up and down the sidewalk, creating a nice atmosphere with music and what have you. And that has produced some really positive results. I've actually seen some situations where kids were starting to get into a beef of whatever sort, and the band showed up and started playing, and then things kind of went back to normal. Kids going up and down the street, some in costume, some not, and just hanging out, which is what they're looking to do. And there's always, unfortunately, or occasionally, I won't say always, someone that's looking to not necessarily be positive, and sometimes that kind of cascades into a bunch of kids running, where they're running, why they're running, maybe they don't even know. Sometimes there are little fights and things like that. But if you can disrupt that, and give them some alternatives, the objective is to be able to prevent that sort of thing. And that's pretty much what collaboration is about.
Wow, that's really impressive. So, how are things different from when you were a kid?
Well, I mean, I didn't grow up in Chicago. I grew up in St. Louis, section of St. Louis called the Central West End, similar to Hyde Park in a lot of ways, which is one reason why I ended up living here. But things were different then. I mean, you went trick or treating, and your parents probably didn't even know where you were going, but it was safer to be able to do those sorts of things. However, I do also remember, um, I think when I was about 6 or 7, a bunch of kids, they jumped the older kid that had taken me out trick or treating, and I ran to a phone booth. It's something that doesn't exist anymore, uh, to hide while they were taking his candy. And I didn't get hurt or anything, but I came home, and then I remember a few years after that. I'm a little older than you. This was in the 70s. My mother examining the apples and other candy and stuff that I'd picked up, because people were putting razor blades and stuff
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. So just saying that to say that Halloween has always been a mixture, I think, in different communities and different parts of the country. It's been a mixed bag. Some people are having great times. Sometimes there's tricks. Sometimes there's treats, and you can debate whether those treats are, are the right kinds of treats. But society's a little bit different now. I mean, whatever was happening back in the day, I was doing it in my own neighborhood. And I could go up and down the street, whether someone was putting a razor blade or something or not. I was still able to go up and down trick or treating and not really have to worry about making my way back home. I always did, but because I was in my neighborhood and I was around people who knew me. But these days, that's not necessarily always the case. And Hyde Park, some people kind of call it the downtown of the South Side. Other communities don't have the kind of business corridor that we have on 53rd Street. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily feel it's safe to be out on Halloween night in their particular neighborhood as they might in Hyde Park. So they come to Hyde Park
Mm-hmm.
to experience
And this
the
led
day
to
and to hang
the
out.
and this led to the one of the first parent takeovers. How is that? Do you think that created a difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, um, and that this whole takeover thing is again what I was alluding to, in that kids are looking for something to do, somewhere to go, somewhere to hang, and they come to Hyde Park and they do that, and in some cases it gets out of hand, And then when the police have to intervene, the kids end up say perhaps they may be in the park. This is the promontory point behind me here, but and they end up going into the neighborhood and what have you, and that's where things kind of get out of hand. What I felt like we needed to try to do was create an atmosphere, whenever these are occurring, just like we do on Halloween, so that maybe things don't get out of hand. And so it wasn't my idea to have a takeover, parent takeover a week or so ago. Someone else came up with it, a guy named Early Walker, I believe, and Trey Pugh, the owner of Sip and Savor, both came together saying, parents should meet up at Sip and Savor on East 53rd Street, etc. And I thought that's a good idea. And so I called up friends and block captains and people in the community and said we should, be a part of that as well. And the kids heard about it, and so a lot of them decided, well, we're not coming to Hyde Park. We don't want to be around those old folks, I guess, and go hang out somewhere else. And so you could say that the parents took over the Hyde Park that day, and if that's what it was, so be it. And I think the main thing is um, we need to continue to do stuff like that to show the kids that first of all, not going to bite you. We don't want you to bite us. We know you need to hang out. You want to have fun, but we also want to make sure that we can still feel like we can go to a restaurant or hang out as well. And I'm still kind of playing around with what to call it. I don't like the phrase takeover. I'm not trying to take over anything. I live in Hyde Park. I want to be able to enjoy myself on any given day or night, just like anyone else. And people from different communities need to come together and be able to experience Hyde Park in a way that's productive and enjoyable for folks. Sort of like a convergence of things, and that's what I'm going to start trying to call it, a convergence. And so, if I hear that there's going to be a teen trend on 53rd Street on a given day or night, I'm going to tell folks, send out a flyer and say we're having a convergence coming out. I call it collaboration in real time, and just hang out. Walk your dogs, come pick up your dinner for the night. Let's have a nice conversation about whatever in Hartford Court, and be out in the community. And I remember when we did this last week or whatever it was, one of the kids said, "Hey, so what is this, a parent takeover?" I said, "Well, I guess you could call it that." And I raised my hand and gave him a five. And, he gave me a high five back, and it was kind of interesting and funny because there were a lot of Hyde Parkers who are teachers from Kenwood who were out because they wanted to make sure the Kenwood students weren't getting into something they shouldn't. Some of the kids said, "Oh my gosh, there's Miss So and So," and they made their way elsewhere, which was kind of funny. But the teachers and the principal at Kenwood want to see their kids be respectable, responsible um, members of their school community, and they were out there to make sure that that's what's happening. And in a sense, that's what the rest of us are out there to do as well. As far as the lack of opportunities and things to keep kids in their own neighborhood to do things that are positive, like it might have been in the past, where it might have been going roller skating or what have you, is a problem that I can't necessarily solve. But at the same time, and I said this last night at the University of Chicago Public Safety Advisory Council meeting, that we as a community have got to find some creative ways to make the experience of those coming to have a trend, if you want to call it that, in Hyde Park, and an experience that they can enjoy the way they want to enjoy that without it getting out of hand. And that's going to take some creativity and some coordination on the part of the community, the local residents, the business community, and local law enforcement. I want to have more conversations with them about how to engage with these kids when things get out of hand. If they're hanging out in the park, for example, um, you shouldn't be getting into a fight because that can get escalated. Okay, so how do we de-escalate that? But if you're hanging out in the park, which is legal and it's pre curfew, how can we stay in the park and be able to enjoy ourselves? And maybe that's going to take some collaboration between city officials and the community to come up with ways to make these spaces more attractive to the kids to do that in a way that doesn't cost things. Resources are tough for folks, and the people need to get out and they need to enjoy themselves. And my armchair uh, theory is that some of this trend activity is an offshoot of the remnants of COVID. People were cooped up, and what was that? Isolated and all of that stuff, social distancing and what have you, and a lot of frustration and anxiety was pent up in people. And after all of that went away, you see people flying 80, 70, 80, 90 miles per hour down Lakeshore Drive like that's a normal thing, and it shouldn't be, but it has become the new norm, and people making U-turns illegally all over the place, and uh, folks flying around with those high revving engines and things. There's a lot of anxiety out there. People are looking for ways to release it, and I'm sure that applies to our teens. And they're looking to go to places, whether it's Hyde Park or downtown Chicago, to do that. And we've got to find a way to be able to do that and it not be a 911 call,
Yeah.
and it's difficult, I'll just say one other thing about, and they should be, but you have to be clear. No teenager is always going to be 100% in lockstep with their parents, during the day.
I
Kids
know
want to
I
hang out
wasn't.
and do their own thing, meet folks, maybe get a phone number or whatever it is that kids are wanting to do. And you're not telling your parents all of that stuff. It's just kind of human nature. But that doesn't mean that while you're out there, you should do something that's going to get end up being a phone call from the police. You don't want that. And
Yeah.
most kids don't want that.
Yeah.
Most kids don't want that. And my objective is to help make sure that that isn't something that someone finds themselves in the middle of.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Benny. Um, I would love to have more time,
Yeah.
but yeah, thank you for joining me today's podcast with Heroes War.